Welcome back to another Foody Friday. This week we're doing an easy spaghetti sauce. So I start off with cutting the end off that's not the root of the onion. We need one onion diced. So I used a red one here. You can use white or yellow, it doesn't matter. It's a red sauce, so you won't see the color change of the onion anyway. So I cut the end off that's not the root, and I'm peeling it. I find that leaving the root end on helps me not to cry as much, and if you're anything like me, I cry like a baby when I cut onions. So I cut each half of the onion. I start by cutting lengthwise down the lines of the onion that are there naturally, and then I turn it sideways and cut across those lines, and you get a perfect dice every time. As I get closer to the root, I just chop the root off, and then I do a rough chop on the end. Doesn't have to be perfect, just bite size or smaller. You won't notice it in the sauce anyway. So I'll set that in the bowl, clean off my station, and we'll move on. So now I have my pan heating up. I added a tablespoon of olive oil. Now I'll add my onions. So now I'll just give my onions a little bit of a stir. I'm just waiting for my pan to heat up. So I'll just mix the onions and the oil together while that happens, and then I will add my spices. So I have a teaspoon of rosemary, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of oregano. That didn't want to come out. There we go. That's better. 1 teaspoon of onion powder. A teaspoon of basil. Half a teaspoon of thyme. And there we go. Those are all my dry spices. So now I'm mixing that up, and I'm going to add half a pound of extra lean ground beef. You can use turkey or chicken, whatever you prefer. So I had half a pound of ground beef in my freezer, so that's what I'm using up. So I'm just breaking that up with my spatula. And then I add just a little bit of water. It helps the ground beef to break down a little bit easier, and it sautés the onions. If you need more, you can always add more. So I'm just breaking down the ground beef into chunks, mixing in the onions and spices. I like the meat not to be very big chunks in my spaghetti sauce, but whatever you prefer. And then I'm adding 4 Italian sausage. I've taken these out of the casing. I used hot Italian sausage, but if you want to use mild, go for it. It's all up to you. And then again, I add another half cup of water. It helps everything just to break down both faster, and I find it a lot easier. If you don't like this step, you can always skip it, but I find it works for me every time. So I'm just going to break those down, mix it in, and then I add my ground garlic. So it's 1 teaspoon of the ground garlic. I don't add it with the onions because it's already so finely chopped, it tends to burn. So I add it at this stage because it's still going to cook for another 20 minutes to half an hour, and it'll get that flavor throughout. So I just let that break down, and now I'm going to add my tomato products. This one is a tomato basil classico sauce. I use a whole jar. You can use 4 cheese, whatever flavor you prefer. So I just dump that in, and then I add water to the jar, put the lid back on, and you'll see here next that I give it a little bit of a shake just to get all the tomato product out of there. Nothing goes to waste, and then I dump that in. Don't worry about it being too liquidy at this point because it will reduce down. So now I'm going to add the diced tomatoes. I have 2 cans of this diced tomato, just plain. You can use whatever you prefer. So I add that and I mix it in, and then I'll add the second can. I just make sure it's mixed well so the spices get throughout and the tomatoes are throughout as well. And then I let that simmer on low medium and I stir it occasionally. I'm going to put the lid on so it doesn't splatter everywhere. And I let that simmer. It usually is about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, but you're going to want to stir it occasionally just to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom or burn. So it's been about 25 minutes. I'm just going to lift this away from me so I don't get a face full of steam. And we'll give this a stir just to make sure nothing has stuck to the pan. Beautiful. So now would be when you season it with salt. I don't start any sauce with salt because as it reduces down, it would be too salty at the very end. So I'm just tasting it to make sure it doesn't need anything or it's not too salty or if it needs its salt at all. And we're good to go. So now I would just pair it with my favorite pasta, spaghetti, macaroni, whatever you please. And there is your easy spaghetti sauce. I hope you guys enjoyed and join me next week for another easy recipe on Foody Friday. Bye guys.